Hello, and welcome to Have Your Say here on MLTV Mainline Network. I'm Ann Minicozzi, president of the Community Breakfast Collaborative, along with my co-host Diana Robertson, who is the president of the NAACP Mainline branch. And our guest today is George J. Badey, Esquire, who is chair of the Radnor Democratic Committee. And we welcome you here today, George.
Happy to be here.
Thank you very much for being here.
Sure.
And we're going to talk about post-election today and beyond. But we should start first with an introduction from you, since some of our viewers may not know that you're the chair of the Radnor Democratic Committee. So could you talk a little bit about your background?
Sure. I've been the chair of the Radnor Democrats for quite a while, since I guess 2010. And before that, I was vice chair since 2004. And we wandered in the wilderness for many years as Democrats here in Radnor, as this township was heavily Republican for generations, for well over a century. And in 2009, 10 years ago, the Democrats took over the Radnor Board of Commissioners for the first time, and we've remained in a leadership role in the township. And now the school board also has Democratic control as well. And so it's been gratifying to see over the years as we've made inroads. And I think to a large extent, it's not the people in our community who have changed, it's the parties that have changed. So the Republican Party has gotten angry and extreme and went for Donald Trump. And a lot of the Republicans, many of whom are my friends, they're no longer buying into that. They never bought into that. They're not going along with the program with the new Republican Party, and that's helped us a lot.
And let's just a little bit more on your background. You're an attorney.
Oh yeah, I'm a lawyer in
And you
Census.
live here locally.
Oh yeah, sure. I grew up in this region. I'm from South Philadelphia originally. I've been a mummer since I was a little kid. I grew up in South Philly. I went to South Philly High School. And then I went to the University of Pennsylvania, which is in West Philly, so it wasn't that far away distance-wise, but it was pretty far away otherwise. And then I went to Villanova Law School. And I started there in 1979, and that's here in Radnor Township. And what a beautiful campus and a beautiful community and neighborhood. And after I got married, we moved here in 1987. So I've been living in Radnor since 1987, and it's just a fantastic place to live and raise a family.
It's a great community that
Sure
we
is.
have here.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. And let's just back up, because you talked about a few things already, but in terms of the commissioner's race in Radnor, thoughts about that?
Yeah, well, what happened this year is we had sweeping victories up and down the ballot. Every race, every ward, every place was a heavy Democratic victory. Not just by a few votes, but by a lot of votes. It was a victory of biblical proportions for the Radnor Democrats this year.
Which one are you most impressed with, then? The commissioner's race here in Radnor, the school board race, or what happened at the Delaware County Council?
Well, I love them all. but I have to say, we already had a leadership. We've already had leadership of both the township and the school board already. So we just maintained and kept that leadership and increased our margins significantly. So that was great. The real historic thing this year was the Delaware County election. The Delaware County Council had been controlled by Republicans for 144 years, since 1875. And for over 40 years, it was unanimously Republican, because they changed the rules back in the mid-1970s, and we are the only county in the entire state out of 67 counties that has no minority party representation. So there were 5 Republicans and 0 Democrats on our county council for decades. 2 years ago, in 2017, the only 2 seats that were up were taken by Democrats. So since the 2017 elections, it was 3-2, 3 Republicans, 2 Democrats. And then on election day, there was a landslide Democratic victory. We swept all 3 county council seats. So now it's 5 Democrats, 0 Republicans. The Democrats won 4 judgeships. So for the first time in any of our lifetimes, Delaware County has elected Democratic judges. There are 20 judges on the Court of Common Pleas in Delaware County, and there were 20 Republicans. For as far back as you go, we've never elected a Democrat as a judge. This year, there were 4 open seats, and we elected 4 Democrats. We also elected a Democratic district attorney, Jack Stolzheimer, who I think is going to do a fantastic job. I mean, I know Jack well. He's been in this community for a long, long time, and he was a prosecutor, an excellent prosecutor, and he has some really good insight on how to make progressive changes that are going to help everybody.
In terms of the Delaware County Council, just so people have some understanding of how what the council votes on impacts them.
Oh,
I know
sure.
a couple of things that were mentioned during all of the campaigning, and we talked about this a little bit, was we don't have a public health office in
Right.
Delaware
Yes.
County.
We're the largest county in the state, probably the largest county in the nation, that has no public health department. So when there are various health issues that come up, various epidemics, mosquito-borne illnesses and things like that, other counties have a health department to turn to for epidemiology, for public health safety, and things like that. We've never had that. And one of the reasons, I believe, is that the Republican Party that ran Delaware County for decades didn't need to worry about good government. They just had to reward their donors and their cronies, so they never did that. And we paid a higher per capita tax for our county services than surrounding counties did, because we called it the corruption tax. That's not going to happen anymore. And now they're going to implement a health department. We have had the only private prison in the whole state out of 67 counties. It was a prison that's for profit. Basically, the more people we could put in jail, the more days we could hold them, or years, the more money that private corporation would make. And it just so happened, coincidentally, that the superintendent of the prison was the brother of the longtime Republican Party chairman. So it was horrible. You should not make money from incarcerating people.
Right.
And that's going to change. So there's going to be some very good changes in Delaware County going forward with the Democratic majority.
Good.
Okay,
Yeah, I know. In
great.
terms of the public health,
Yeah, well,
that's something
definitely.
that we talked about
Yeah, we need.
as well.
That's just amazing that did not exist.
Yeah.
When you look at the no-bid contracts, the cronies, the system that they had where they had all these lawyers that were on the payroll, Republican lawyers, that every single judge in the county was Republican. And I'm not casting aspersions on any individual judge. I mean, I'm a lawyer. I've practiced in Delaware County, and some of those judges I found to be fair and intelligent and good judges. But let's have some balance. Let's have Democrats and
Yeah,
Republicans
you
on
want
the
to have a
bench.
two-party system.
Even in Philadelphia, they have some Republican judges, as democratic
Oh, yeah.
as Philadelphia
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
But we've had a Democratic registration advantage for several years, but finally, this year, it all came home. And there were sweeping victories up and down the ballot in municipalities that never were Democrat before. I used to be able to brag for the last 10 years that Radnor is the largest democratically controlled municipality out of 49 municipalities. Radnor was the largest democratically controlled municipality since 2009. I can't say that anymore because Upper Darby, with 83,000 people, instead of Radnor's 31 or 32,000, Upper Darby Township is now democratically controlled, and I'm thrilled.
That's a big change.
It's a huge
Yeah.
change.
Wow.
And Haverford, well, our school board used to be 9-0 Republican for a century. With one exception, back in the 1980s, it was 8-1. But it was almost always 9-0 Republican. And in 2005, we broke through and got a couple of seats, and then it went back and forth a little bit here and there. And then this year, it's now 9-0 Democratic. And on December 3rd, I don't know when this is going to be broadcast, but December 3rd is going to be the school board swearing in.
Okay.
And on January 6th, it's going to be in the morning will be the county council swearing in, and in the evening will be the Radnor Township Commissioner swearing in.
And how about the district attorney? What's the impact of having this district attorney elected? What changes do you think?
Well,
he'll make?
listening, I went to the debate, and Kat Copeland, who was the DA appointed by the judges, what happened was Jack Whalen was elected DA in 2015, but then he ran for judge in 2017. When he became a judge, there was an opening, and the way the law is, the Board of Judges, all Republicans, have to vote to replace the DA. So they selected Kat Copeland, who is a Republican, and she has served for the last 2 years. But I think, Jack Stolzheimer has vision. He has great vision for the future. And for example, I was at the debate and between the DA candidates, and when people are jailed for a minor offense that doesn't threaten public safety, but they're jailed because they're too poor to pay bail,
Yeah.
the county's going to pay more to house these people. They're going to lose their jobs. They're going to be estranged from their family. It's going to devastate their life. That's not how you rehabilitate people. That's not how you keep communities going in a positive direction. So Jack's going to look for alternatives to that, so we don't have people in jail unnecessarily.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. People should never, ever be in jail just because they can't afford to get out on a small offense.
Yep.
I'm not talking about dangerous
Major,
criminals.
right.
Jack is going to be there to protect those who need to be protected, protect our citizens from violent criminals. Yes, of course. But that's not what Delaware County law enforcement has been doing consistently.
And that's held true for a lot of other counties as well.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, but now we have, Chester County elected a Democrat as well. So we're going to see changes in the criminal justice system. We have to see changes. The system we have is not working. We jail more people in this nation than just about any other country on earth, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So
Right.
we need to find better ways of controlling the situation.
Well, some of this have to, legislation or statutes have to
Well,
be put
not
in place to
necessarily.
deal with some of these things?
Well, some of the things, but a lot of it comes down to prosecutorial discretion. A lot of it comes down. The district attorney has a lot of power under our system. They have the power to decide to charge people or not to charge people. They have
Right.
the power to, to make whatever request they're going to make. And if they're looking at a person who's not a flight risk, who's not a danger to the community, who committed a minor offense that does not belong in jail
Right.
awaiting trial. It's just not the way you should do things. But under the old system, admittedly, if somebody's brother and their private corporation were going to make a lot of money, if they could put these people in jail and fill up the jail, it's like a hotel vacancy thing.
Yeah.
The more rooms they fill, the more cells they fill, the more money they make.
Right.
That is an inherently corrupt and outrageous system, and it's going to be over now that the Democrats have prevailed in the election.
Great.
A related issue, the census, taking the census is going to be happening pretty soon. And I heard on the radio that when people are in prison, they are counted in the state that they're in prison as part of the census.
But not allowed to vote.
Not allowed to
Right.
vote, and then they're not really a resident of the prison, is what the issue was, that they should be counted where they're from, and that would adjust
Well,
how
now
many
that's,
people you have in Congress, everything.
well, sure, that's not what the Republicans want. The Republicans have been gaming the system for years now. And the reason why is when Republicans, when they get into office, they cut taxes for the top 1/10 of 1%. They drive us into deficits. They do things that don't help the average American. So they can't stand up there and say, vote for me and I'll lower taxes for the rich and we'll screw over everybody else, because they won't get, nobody will vote for them. So they use other methods. They use gerrymandering. They use, let's count the prisoners and we put this prison in a rural area.
Right.
We need more Congress people that are Republicans, so let's count those people in that district.
Right.
I mean, just real quick, thankfully it's now ancient history, but in Pennsylvania in 2011, they redrew the congressional districts. And when they did that, we had a Republican governor, we had a Republican state Senate, a Republican state House, and a Republican Supreme Court. So they had all the power. And we had, at that time, about 4 million Democrats and 3 million Republicans in Pennsylvania at the time. And we had 18 congressional districts. So do the math. If we fairly district this thing, there should be 10 Democrats and 8 Republicans, give it maybe 11 and 7, okay? But no, the way they drew them, they used what's called packing and cracking. And we had 13 Republicans and 5 Democrats going to Washington to represent our state, even though our state voted majority Democratic in the congressional election. These are the evils and the corruptions in our system that people are not paying attention to enough. So some of my friends are Trump voters, and it doesn't seem to it doesn't seem to penetrate when you
Yeah.
explain that to them.
Doesn't register.
It's frustrating, and it's not American. It's not
Yeah.
democratic.
Right.
And we haven't really improved the system to avoid gerrymandering. We don't have a nonpartisan process for doing the redistricting.
Unfortunately,
yet.
that's true. Now, in 2018, in January of 2018, I guess it was, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court struck down those lines.
Right.
When I called it packing and cracking, what I meant by that was, in Democratic districts, they packed Democrats in there to use up as many of those 4 million Democrats as you can. In some districts, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, you have upwards 80%, 85, even up to 90% Democrats versus 10% or 15% Republican vote. They packed them in there to use up those Democrats. In other districts, the Republican will win 55 to 45, 58 to 42, things like that. So, I ran for Congress in 2012, and it was gerrymandered terribly. Our district took in 5 different counties, but just the Republican sections of each county. So I lost 59 to 41. And but in Philadelphia, I guess it was Choctaw at the time. I think it was 90 to 10. So they arranged it and gerrymandered it in such a way that it's undemocratic. It's wrong.
Yeah.
So that has to change, and it hasn't changed yet. The United States Supreme Court, unfortunately, the Republicans on that court voted not to come down on that.
And then it's a lot of years waiting for the judge to overturn the situation in Pennsylvania. You still have a whole bunch of elections.
Yeah, well, we're going to see what
happening under
happens. We're going to
the
see.
wrong system.
Yeah, and the same thing is true for the state Senate and the state House. We have more Democrats, yet in both houses, they're Republican controlled. How could that be without unfair gerrymandering? It's anti-democratic. It's wrong. It's got to change. And hopefully, judging by at least the elections in Delaware County, people are waking up. Finally, thankfully.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll be on the right track going forward, I hope.
Yes. So we were talking a little bit earlier about the Marsys Law, and what I find interesting is that a lot of people, I think it hasn't been discussed enough for people to fully understand the impact that could have. I think there were no public hearings or nothing on that before it ended up on the ballot, although it was voted for in both the House and the
Senate
and the Senate, yes, and the governor was
2 sessions, and to appear on the ballot is not easy. The problem with Marsys Law, the people behind it, it's not that they have bad motives. I understand, but I feel strongly that we should not tamper with our Constitution. There are ways to protect victims through statutes that we don't need to tinker with the balance, the delicate balance that exists in our Constitution that provides criminal defendants with necessary protections against the power of the state. It's not to suggest that a criminal defendant deserves to go free and they've done something terrible. But what it does suggest is you need to make sure that due process protections remain in place, that a person has a right to defend themselves, because not everybody's guilty. And people should not go to prison who are not guilty. And that's an aim of the system. And unfortunately, Marsys Law, one of the things that troubled me greatly was a restriction on discovery. It was going to not allow a criminal defendant to request discovery from a victim. And that should be up to the judge in any given case. Obviously the victim should never, ever be harassed by a defendant. There shouldn't be frivolous motions made that would further burden a victim. Absolutely. But the judge is there to decide those things. But if a constitutional amendment comes in and says you're not allowed to get discovery from a victim, what if a cell phone record from a victim would prove a defense? You're not allowed to get that? Person's going to go to prison because they're not allowed to get discovery. So,
that's critical.
So thankfully what happened is the Commonwealth Court, Judge Ellen Sleisler in the Commonwealth Court issued an injunction, and she said the week before the election, she goes, it's too late to take the question off the ballot. It has to stay on just because there's not enough time to take it off the machine. But she ordered the elections authorities to not count the votes. So we found out what the votes were. It passed because they were doing all kinds of commercials, but it doesn't count. That went to the Supreme Court, and I think the vote was 4-3 to maintain that injunction in place. It doesn't mean that it's decided finally decided.
Right.
They just said, we're going to keep this injunction in place, and we, the Supreme Court, will now take a look at it. And I'm hoping that the Supreme Court says, you can't do this. There are too many constitutional separate issues decided in one
Right.
question. And that was the basis for the challenge, and hopefully that will be thrown out. And I just think that it underscores a larger problem in politics today, in our nation today, where legislators are afraid. The governor's afraid. People in office are afraid. Ooh, if I do this, I'll get attacked. I'm tired of that. Do what's right. If you get attacked, stand up for what's right and say, I thought you would attack me for that, but I did what I thought was right, and here's why. Don't be afraid. Too many people just, ooh, if I vote against this victim thing, I'll get attacked. Well, you know what? You're there to do the right thing. You're not there just to do what you think is popular at that moment. And I think we need to have more people with a spine that stand up and do that. And, you know, people may have voted for that because they believed in it. So I don't want to say everyone that voted for it did it for political expediency. But I do think that, you know, there should be more backbone.
Right. And I don't think people fully understood what that meant, because like you said with the commercial, that only touched on certain areas, and we already do have a Victims Act.
That's absolutely correct. Exactly right. And it's exactly right. And the thing is, if somebody goes on TV and says, are you for apple pie? And are you for America? And, you know, the red, white, and blue, and are you for victims' rights? Should victims have rights? Of course they should.
Yes.
So when you're going to frame an issue like that, that's a no-lose thing, unless somebody's going to say, whoa, whoa, of course I'm for victims. Don't play that game. What about this thing here? What about this? I don't like that. Don't mess with our Constitution. And I think we need to have people step up and do the right thing, not the popular thing.
Yeah.
Well, it's so hard now for voters to discern what's really being put before them, because like what you're saying is that the way that it was worded on the ballot is very misleading.
Oh, absolutely.
And then
It
the
was,
commercials are almost impossible not to be persuaded by them, because they really do appeal to you. So how do we, I don't know what to call this, like how do you, defensive democracy, like instead of defensive driving, you have to like, you know, be on guard and question things quite deeply before you make an opinion.
We're going into a bold new area that we as a nation have never been in before. And I say that because of social media and the fact that there's so many opinions, there's so many fake news facts out there. And I'm not talking about the New York Times. I'm talking about truly fake news out there on social media and otherwise, where people are falling victim. When you look at Fox News, it's an embarrassment that this company is out there just peddling lies. You know, when you I saw Gordon Sondland, who was the ambassador to the European Union, testified in front of the House Intelligence Committee, and he said, yes, there was a quid pro quo, about that issue. And I saw on the CNN thing, the banner said, Sondland says, yes, there was a quid pro quo. And then there was a banner on Tucker Carlson from Fox News that said, no, Sondland says no quid pro quo. I mean, he just didn't say that. And so you not only have Fox News, you have a lot of other fake news outlets. People need to be more vigilant about what news they get, where it's coming from, how reliable it is. And that points up an even more insidious, frightening, dangerous thing, which is Russia. So the Russians have attacked our political system. The Russians have identified those fault lines in our society, and they're exploiting them. And they're turning us against each other as a nation. I have never seen our nation so divided. And people just believe things that are crazy. And you know, the fact that I'm speaking this way is divisive. But the people on the other side are speaking just as divisively. I just, you know, we need to try to come together as a nation and say, we're going to find the truth. And because otherwise we're in deep trouble. The Russians are winning. What better way to beat? They couldn't beat us conventionally. So they're going to beat us by driving these wedges into our society through social media and otherwise. And Donald Trump, when we hear people say, oh, it was the Ukrainians, not the Russians, who were rigging the 2016 election, that's a Russian talking point put out there by Putin and his henchmen. And Trump is repeating it. A lot of Republicans are repeating it. And it's scary.
And I think that is one of the things we have to, especially going into 2020,
Yep.
that we really are going to have to do more to have, I think, public hearings, things where different sides can be presented on the issue, or folks have an opportunity, because most people don't have time to sit and read things or, look up to see all of what legislation is coming through. They just don't have the time. But in a public hearing, you might take a little time to say, well, I'll sit and listen to what the issues are. Somebody can point out the pros and cons, and then be able to make intelligent decisions.
That's another huge problem in our government right now is a guy by the name of Mitch McConnell. He's the Republican Senate Majority Leader, and he alone gets to decide what the Senate votes on. So this term, since the Democrats have taken over the House of Representatives early last year, they've passed about 400 separate bills, passed and sent to the Senate and said, okay, let's fix this problem, let's fix that problem. So when you say Congress is doing nothing, it's really not true. Congress has passed close to 400 bills, and Mitch McConnell has stopped almost all of them. He just won't bring them up for a vote, because if he brought a lot of them for a vote, they would pass. But he won't do that. So, I mean, we look at Trump and say what an abomination that man is, and there's no argument there. But Mitch McConnell is even worse in some ways, because he's actually stopping good legislation from getting through.
Right, and we want our government to function for us. So we would want to have votes on all of those bills.
Right, he just
and
won't allow
that's also
votes.
that's our representation. That's why we're paying our taxes.
Exactly.
So we need that to. How do we change that?
We change that by voting for Democrats for Senate. So when Pat Toomey runs for Senate in 2022, he needs to be taken out, because he is supporting Mitch McConnell. People around the country, but the Senate, it's a problem, because they have stopped everything. Mitch McConnell has stopped everything. What he did in 2016 was unprecedented. So Justice Scalia died in February of 2016. It's a presidential election year, but that's happened before. So in 1988, we had an opening in the Supreme Court, and Ronald Reagan's last year, because in '88 is when George H.W. Bush won the presidency against Dukakis. So during that year, a vacancy was created. President Reagan appointed Anthony Kennedy. He was approved 98-0. A lot of us thought, Kennedy's a little more conservative than I'd like him to be, but he was qualified, so the Democrats voted for him. That's how it's supposed to be. In 2016, Justice Scalia dies. Obama's the president. He gets to appoint a replacement.
That's right.
He appointed Merrick Garland, and Mitch McConnell said, we're not going to hold a vote. But they just didn't hold a vote. Now,
and that was their
that's
job
just unbelievable.
to do.
And he said at the time, and Fox News was saying, well, no Senate ever puts a justice on the court during a presidential election year. And then somebody said, what about 1988 and Kennedy? Oh, okay, yeah. But the thing is, that's not the way America works.
Right.
Obama was the president, duly elected. He gets to appoint the Supreme Court
right.
justice. Senate has to vote. You might not like the person, but if he's qualified or she's qualified, you vote. And they didn't do that.
But the other thing that needs to change is one person, no matter what party they are, having that complete control.
Right.
That part needs to change.
Yeah, I think the way the Senate is governed is a problem.
Yeah.
The fact that this one person is stopping all the legislation from going through, it's just insane.
Yeah.
So people in Radnor seem to have gotten it. People in Delaware County seem to have gotten it. They said, we need a Republican Party that's sane. So the Republican Party that exists now, led by Donald Trump, needs to be destroyed, needs to go away. We need to have a new Republican Party rise up in its place to provide balance in our political system.
We need to have a two-party system that's thriving so that we can bounce the ideas off of each other, and it's okay to disagree, but then ultimately we'll compromise and get some legislation passed.
And I wish you were up there doing that stuff, because that's exactly what we need. It's exactly what we need, yes.
Well, once again,
until we get that back again, I think we just got to put all Democrats in there, and then the Republican Party will have to reinvent itself.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, once again, we've come to the end. Once again, at the end of our program, but we want to keep these things in mind. We want to remember what democracy really is, what it represents, and how we participate in that process. And so as we're winding up 2019 and moving on to 2020. We want everybody to pay more attention, to challenge things that are not right, and so that we will all be able to have our say. Thank you.